Welcome to the most opinionated space podcast on the internet.
At Astra, the podcast where we talk about the intersection between space, policy, and technology.
I'm Jack.
And I'm Newton.
I have a master's of public policy degree with a concentration in science and space policy.
And I'm a PhD in computer science and an all-around tech geek.
All right, everybody, we have extended the deadline, like all good professors do, for the Tshirt design contest. We're extending that to Sunday, October 8th, 11:59 p.m. We will announce the three winners, or the three staff picks, next episode of Ad Astra. And the rules after that remain the same. We pick the best three. You vote for your favorite one. The winning design, the designer gets to come on the show, gets a free T-shirt, and
our undying gratitude. So just remember, like a college professor and like a lake project, because we're extending the deadline, the quality of the project has to be that much better. We are expecting works of art, beautiful works
and
of art.
And I have seen some of the draft submissions, and they are pretty beautiful. There's going to be some stiff competition. Yeah. I was expecting there to be, okay, we only have to pick three. That's going to be easy. It's not going to be easy whatsoever. We're going to have to work for this. We're the victims here.
So get your entries in Sunday night, October 8th at 11:59 and 57 seconds.
We're not that generous.
We're not that generous. It's 2 seconds of my life I can't get back. Anyway, possibly more importantly, even though the contest is very important, as you guys have probably heard in the news, there have been a number of hurricanes that have left people without food, homes, power, and the like. The most recent being in Puerto Rico, where 3.4 million people are without power, which, as far as someone who has worked in a certain segment of the power grid research and development space, they are living the literal nightmare that I was working to, that we were working against for the United States, for about 4 years. So please give donations to organizations like globalgiving.org, American Red Cross. Two of the key ones for Puerto Rico that I've been seeing going around are Project Hope, who has sent a medical team to Puerto Rico to provide emergency care after Hurricane Maria, and AmeriCares, which sent shipments of medicine and medical supplies to Puerto Rico and Dominica. There's been tons of private citizens who have been giving their aid. I recently even saw Tidal doing it. They sent a plane over there. Jay-Z's got your back, Puerto
Jay-Z
Rico.
thing, yeah.
So yeah, if you guys are looking for places to donate, we'll have a list of places as always in the show notes. Hurricane Harvey victims Hurricane Maria victims. There's been so many hurricanes recently that have left people stranded that I'm getting them mixed up. Hurricane Maria victims absolutely need your help. Living without power is devastating. I think I saw a report saying about 16 out of 64 hospitals still have power on the island. So get in your donations and do whatever you can to help. And maybe I've been meaning to do this for a while now, but I've been wanting to look up some places where you could actually even go down and spend time helping. So those may or may not get into the show notes for this week. Otherwise we'll post them later in the week. But now on to the show about space. After that,
It's been a very
it's been rough.
Newton, like Newton and I were talking about before the show. The last couple of weeks have been pretty rough on people all across the United States and all across the world. With the recent terrorist attack in Las Vegas, to Hurricanes Maria, Irma, Harvey, and the various other tropical storms that have made landfall. Give your time, give your effort, give your energy. But also take care of yourselves. This is going to be a long fight for many of these things, and we need everybody in it. I think it was Lin-Manuel Miranda was tweeting about that today. Make sure you prioritize your self-care for the next couple weeks as we slog through this very difficult time for a lot of people. But don't forget to give your care, your cash, and your compassion.
Yep.
Yeah.
And look to friends on Facebook, there's more than just a bunch of tweets about how angry we can get out there. I've saw a ton of people posting things about how other people can help, and I've seen tons of people raising money. There was even a random, a pop up, effectively 5K this weekend, where it was just all about raising money to donate to the folks in Puerto Rico. So look for local events. If you are going to be poking around online trying to get news about these things, look for what your friends are posting about ways you can help, ways you can donate. There are social things you can do. If you don't have money, you can donate your time. So make sure to donate. But anyway, on to the show about podcast. Space. We're going to get to space, I swear.
Eventually.
In latest from Washington, we're going to cover NSpC having a meeting for the first time on Thursday. In the Space News Highlight of the Week, we're going to be getting to the thing that literally everyone has asked me about since it's occurred, Elon Musk saying that we're going to get to Mars but in 2024, or at least the outlook that we're going to get to Mars in 2024. Then in international news, we're going to actually talk about the UAE announcing their astronaut corps, as well as Egypt's government saying that it has approved draft legislation to create a national space agency. In latest in tech, we will get back to Puerto Rico and how NASA is helping where it can. And then we will address coming soon to space.
All right. So let's start off from Washington, actually just outside of Washington in Chantilly, Virginia. So as you have all heard us talk about for weeks on end at this point, the National Space Council, NSpC for short, chaired by Mike Pence, and with the executive secretary being my former professor and good friend Scott Pace, will be holding its first meeting ever. The first meeting of the third National Space Council to have ever existed. Its first meeting is on Thursday, October 5th, at the Udvar-Hazy Center, which is connected to the Air and Space Museum.
The meeting they held because they didn't want anyone to go there. No, I love the people at Udvar-Hazy. Let me take that back right away. It's really far.
It is the most out-of-the-way Smithsonian museum, but might be one of the most worth it because Discovery is there.
That's true. That is one thing that I love about going to Udvar-Hazy when I decide to, charter a flight there is
from DCA. I charter a flight from DCA to Udvar-Hazy.
Yeah. What do we anticipate them talking about, discussing at this first meeting?
So the anticipation from a lot in the space community is kind of one of uncertainty. They are not entirely sure what they're going to be talking about, but being the first meeting, and with most, if not all, of the secretaries and department heads, the membership of the Space Council will be there. That they're going to be tackling things from civil space to defense and commercial space.
It sounds like they're really harping on commercial space. That's sort of the common theme I've been hearing through. It's been the through line for all the news articles that I've read about this. Is also they really want to focus on that enterprise.
Commercial space has been in the news quite a bit recently.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure if there's been a lot of extrapolating what's been going on in the news to, what the government is going to start addressing. I'm sure commercial space is going to play a major role because since the last Space Council existed, which was in the early 90s, there's been a lot of changes to the way that we do things, and commercial space is from a cultural standpoint, commercial space is at the forefront of the change in the space sector. So that it is very likely that they're going to be tackling that, but they will also be tackling civil space and national security issues. Probably with this administration, national security will most likely take precedent over civil space. So if there were a ranking of the things that they would cover, it's going to be commercial space first, national security space, then civil space in last. Sure. But don't think that means that they're not going to cover it. I'm sure they're going to be talking about the Mars program, what we're going to be doing after the 2020 rover and the potential 2022 orbiter. There's again, there's a lot on the table for them to cover. I don't think they can do this in one day. They're not going to solve all the problems or even touch on all the problems in a day. But it will be a good first step. And assuming that this becomes a quarterly meeting, that's, 4 meetings a year ain't bad. We had 0 meetings a year for the last 20 years. So this is kind of an upgrade. But so I want to read off just to sort of give you a glimpse as to who's going to be there. So there's actually going to be quite a few people there. So of course, Scott Pace, the executive secretary, is going to be there. He's basically going to be running that meeting. But at the helm, in the first chair is going to be Vice President Mike Pence, who serves as the Space Council chairman. Also there will be Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Secretary of Defense James Mad Dog Mattis, Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross.
Only his troops call him that.
I guess I can't call him that. But all right, so Secretary of Commerce Wilbur Ross, Secretary of Transportation Elaine Chow, Acting Secretary of Homeland Security Elaine Duke, Office of Management and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney, National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster, Director of National Intelligence Daniel Coates, Acting NASA Administrator Robert Lightfoot, which, again, that might change soon with Jim Bridenstine being announced, Deputy Chief Technology Officer of the United States Michael Kratsios.
How do you get that job?
Yeah, that's a pretty cool job. And the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Paul J. Selva. So all of those folks will be there, including, I'm sure, plenty of press and the public, being a Smithsonian institution. Udvar Hazy will probably be open to the public that day. Not sure if they're going to allow people to get that close to the meeting, but there should at least be some coverage within the museum. So if you happen to be at Udvar Hazy that day, you might very well see Vice President Mike Pence and his entourage talking about space. So I'm excited. There's going to be a live cast as well, from what I'm told. So I'll be tuning into that.
All right. So as far on to, if you got nothing left and latest from Washington, has it been a slow week in Washington on the space front this week?
It sort of has, because everyone's been in Adelaide for the International Astronautical Congress.
I haven't heard.
So
I
haven't been talking your ear off about this. But yeah, there's not really much coming up. Congress is in session and trying to get a budget deal together for December. There's a lot of work on tax reform and healthcare still. So space is sort of taking a backseat policy wise, but with the National Space Council coming up, there could very well be some high profile hearings or meetings going on in the next couple weeks. So stay tuned for information on that.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, in the meantime, we'll get right to Adelaide, where Elon Musk is clearly going to get to Mars in 2024, right, Jack?
I don't know if you could hear that sigh.
I'm going to give my opinion after this because it's going to surprise you, but I'm happy he did. I'm actually happy he's saying this.
I'm very happy too. So
long story short,
go ahead.
All right, I'll take it. So,
your turn.
We're going to become one of those podcasts where we just talk over each other constantly. All right, so SpaceX plans to begin the construction of a new rocket and spacecraft next year that could lead to humans landing on Mars as early as 2024. This is a big technology push that's going to come from SpaceX with their leader at the helm, Elon Musk. On Friday, speaking at the International Astronautical Congress in Adelaide, Australia, he provided an updated architecture for this new, smaller spacecraft and what appears to be a viable way to actually fund a program to do just this. They went through various ideas. He stated, like even as far as a Kickstarter, which probably wouldn't wouldn't be able to fund quite this big of a mission. No,
it'd be chump change, even if it was the biggest Kickstarter on Kickstarter.
Yeah,
it would be chump change compared to the cost of what this rocket is gonna take.
Yeah. So basically, they want to have one giant system, and I'm paraphrasing what he said at the conference, so you can actually go and look it up at IAC's website. But they want to combine all of their biggest achievements into one giant system. So that's one booster and ship that replaces the Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, and the Dragon. And he believes that if he can do that, then that makes this mission truly viable. He's going to combine all this into a new rocket known as the BFR, which is a euphemism for a big effing rocket. um, so,
which you got to give credit to Elon Musk for coming up with some of the most childish but most memorable names for things. Like,
I think
how
that's a
all
tech
of the
industry thing, though, in general. I mean, I am
well,
walking
yeah,
around with a phone whose operating system is called the Oreo. Like,
okay, yeah,
I
that's
had Lollipop a few months ago.
yeah,
Like,
that is fair, but
yeah,
Elon, I think, is the most high profile individual to be doing this. I mean, just look at the Tesla
yeah,
cars. Is
it's
like,
true.
if you look at, the Model S, the Model 3, and the Model X, it spells something out.
Yeah, I know. It's ridiculous. He's getting as close as he can. No, you could be closer to being Tony Stark. I'm not going to say that. You could get closer if you wanted to. I
He
don't know
could
anyone
definitely
who
get closer,
is.
but
Most of the tech folks that we know of are fairly humble-ish. But he could be closer if you
yeah.
want to.
Granted, although Elon likes to show off in the naming department, I think he wore the same thing to Guadalajara last year. So I don't think he's as
Tech guys also only wear the same thing.
yeah, I know. They
I
have
don't know
their
if you've ever
outfit.
seen Mark
They
Zuckerberg
have
in a
their
room full of
outfit.
like military generals, but he's still wearing that T-shirt. All right, like it happens.
Well, soon to be President Zuck
Oh
will bring a
god.
lot of
Anyway,
class to the White House.
anyway, the reusable BFR will use 31 Raptor engines burning densified or supercooled liquid methane and liquid oxygen to lift 150 tons or 300,000 pounds to low Earth orbit, roughly equivalent to the Saturn V,
Mhm.
NASA Saturn V moon rocket. By comparison, a Falcon 9 can carry about 50,000 pounds to Leo, while the Falcon Heavy can carry up to about 145,000 pounds. The initial version of SLS, which is likely what we'll be using for Deep Space Gateway and beyond, that one's being prepared in 2019 to give us a boost of about 154,000 pounds. So he's talking about twice the SLS. So it's bold. The SLS suffered from more policy hurdles, though, I think, than engineering hurdles in most cases, like getting funded and all of that. So fair. But yeah, what do you think? I obviously don't think he's going to get to Mars in 2024. However, this is good for the industry. I think overall, this is good for the industry. What they're setting themselves up to do is be, if not the prime contractor, then then probably the highest funded contractor on this mission, on the Mars mission when we do it in the late 2030s, and on missions that occur between now and then. So I think it's a smart move on their part. I think it's a good way to sort of continue to drive technology as we try to get an overall Mars mission going, led by NASA as it should be. But I think this is a great way to kind of push the envelope, create as much new technologies as you can to help out with that mission and just help them to become an even bigger player in this game.
Yeah, so I think if we go by Elon time, 2024 equates to roughly, I don't know, 2048 in real people time.
You know what? Okay, that's actually a great question. That's a great question. Do we think, so let's say NASA goes in the late 2030s, do we think Elon can support a mission in 2048? I would say yes, actually.
Oh yeah, if humans are walking on Mars with the NASA armband on in the mid to late 2030s. I think Elon could definitely do it by the mid to late 2040s.
Oh, I totally think he could. Yeah.
The problem that I think, and Elon does this every year, it seems, even though this is only the second year in a row, but I think it soon will become an annual occurrence where SpaceX has all of their, their hype built up in late September, early October during an IAC, and then it kind of dwindles as the new year occurs, and then there's Space Symposium in Colorado where they kind of get a big bump, and then they dwindle off, and then here comes October again, and it's going to be a cycle. Whether that's going to equate to them actually making progress on rockets is another story. I guess the part of Elon's plan that doesn't make the most sense to me is that they're going to build a stockpile of rockets of the Falcon 9 and of the Falcon Heavy to just kind of keep in storage for a little while.
As one does.
In case, say they actually build the BFR and it's 2030 and it's, getting off the ground, everything's fine, but it's kind of like still the first like dozen launches. So people, especially larger companies, I mean, smaller, I guess companies all across the board are still a little leery about it. If they really want to, they can just use a Falcon 9 or a Falcon Heavy if it gets the job done.
BFR is not going to be used by companies. There's unless companies have any interest in something like the moon, BFR is not going to be, which they might in the late 2030s or 2040s, but BFR is not going to be that's not the business case for this. The business case for this is government services.
Well, so the business case, I think there is maybe a mid 2020s to 2030s business case for the BFR. If you're able to get companies to work together on, 150 tons to orbit is a lot of stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, if the Falcon 9 can get about 25 tons to orbit, you could fit. I mean, how many Falcon 9 payloads is that in a BFR? That's 6 Falcon 9 payloads. So if you're able to get 6 companies to work together, or you get a company that wants a big constellation of geosynchronous satellites out, then BFR starts to make sense.
But with the capability that's required to maintain this rocket, to keep it together during flight, to make sure it doesn't explode effectively, I'm not actually sure that math is appropriate, because I'm not sure that doing that is any cheaper than just ordering 6 Falcon 9s.
Well, immediately it's going to be cheaper to order 6 Falcon 9s, but that's the whole idea behind.
But down the line,
Elon's business plan is the more you do it, the cheaper it becomes. And I mean, that's the business plan for like basically everything. And like in my tweet storm, when I quote live streamed it, when I watched it the day after he made the announcement or did the speech, I talked about that the first tickets on the Boeing 707 were not cheap, but you can get a ticket on a Boeing 707 for like $80 now, because of the amount of planes that are out there, the amount of variety in travel destinations, in the number of airlines that you can fly on. I mean, I can guarantee if you are listening to this podcast, you have flown on a Boeing 707 at some point. It is still one of the most popular aircraft ever designed. Now, Elon's idea is that you eventually, that the BFR is going to be the 707 of space, that you're going to have people going on commercial trips on this. You're going to have people, I mean, just like you have people flying a Boeing 707 commercially, you're going to have cargo. So you're going to have industry using the BFR to get things to orbit. You're going to have the military. The military uses the KC-135, which is technically the predecessor to the Boeing 707.
I mean, he was breaking it down at the IAC. Like, he's been thinking a lot about actually having people on these flights. He talked about how you could have 5 or 6 people per cabin, and you get normally about 100 people per flight to Mars, which I have if I had an entire day, I could tell you all the things that are wrong with that.
What I liked that he brought up is the solar storm shelter that he actually mentioned.
That was really cool.
But here's the thing that kept plaguing me, and I kind of didn't want to put it into words until I thought about it more, and it's really it's making more sense to me that a lot of what BFR, which I guess is just an upgraded version of the ITS, the Interplanetary Transit System, is a lot of this is just back of the napkin math.
Yeah.
Oh, well, if we have this many cabins and this is the volume and this is, and yeah, you're right. That is the problem with it.
You're not taking into account all of the engineering problems that come into play, all of the real world sort of mission based problems. I mean, Elon's been a Leo. That's it. This is a whole different class of problems we're talking about. Getting to Mars here, right? And NASA's going to work out a ton of them, which is that's effectively their mission, right? Working out these things to explore the frontier and paving the way for humanity. Elon is humanity. So, you're right. It's back of the napkin. Like, I could walk into, I could walk into any room and explain in 5 minutes the idea of this, but actually doing something practical, making this real, is a lot more work than most people would think. I don't know if it's more work than he's necessarily thinking, because if you ask me if I think that if I truly believe that Elon believes that he's going to get to Mars in 2024, I'd say the answer is no.
I don't think he believes it either.
I just want that to be on record. I don't think he actually believes that. I think that it's a good way to build hype. It's ambitious as far as being a company, and it ends up with you having a significant number of technologies developed along the way, throughout this ambitious push, that just make you a high stakes player in the game. I mean, and that's what SpaceX is and is still becoming. Is they are, they've worked their way up from, when was SpaceX created? Back in
2002.
2002. Yeah, they've worked their way up from being, this company that was owned by this guy who was in e-commerce.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, granted, the first Falcon 1 launch was 2008.
But still, I mean, if you ask me how long it would take for me to build a company that could actually start giving commercial rides to space to different businesses, 6 years is reasonable. If you're talking about a new technology, right? Keep in mind, he's trying to launch new kinds of rockets, not just use reliable rocket technology that has been used by NASA for years and years. He's trying to do new things and execute new con ops, which is impressive.
But and I guess maybe to go off your point, to move on to my next little topic of discussion is, these aren't, he's trying to use all these new concepts and new engineering feats to do these things. But if you really look at some of these concepts, they go back pretty far. I mean, a lot of what he's describing is, and this is true for the Falcon 9 with its landing capability. This was something that was talked about in Destination Moon, the 1950 adaptation of rocket ship Galileo, Robert Heinlein. These are not necessarily new concepts, but they're re-energized by Elon. I mean, sort of the next little thing I wanted to talk about was his whole idea of using rockets for terrestrial transit. Because BFR can be used for Moon, Mars. It's supposed to be that one rocket fits all. But the fact that he then pivoted to a commercial application on Earth was very interesting to me, because it reminded me a lot of, have you ever seen that show, Man in the High Castle?
Yeah.
There's a couple scenes where I can't remember what the main guy, whatever his name is, the young guy. It'll come to me.
John or something. It's John.
Yeah,
John something. Yeah.
How he he flies to and from Berlin like all the time, and they never really describe it. And the only time that they show airports, they do show jet aircraft.
Yeah.
But if you listen to the dialogue and sort of read into the story, they're using rockets to get there. So this was an idea that von Braun came up with when he was engineering for the Nazi war machine. Was he was the inventor of the V1, the V2, and the V3 rocket. The V2 is what bombarded London. It was an unmanned vehicle. The V4, which he had designs for, was going to be a manned rocket that the pilot would be able to steer, into London, into Paris, into wherever it was that the target city was. Of course, killing the pilot, but it would be a lot easier to guide that with a person than using the trajectory and spin of the Earth and everything. So the V4, and you can actually see this sort of idea in the first Captain America movie when they're in that big wing bomber. The little bombers that come out of that are manned. That the whole idea behind that is based on the V4. Anyway, so the V10 is the basis for the BFR's terrestrial transit capabilities, because the V10 was supposed to be a massive rocket, supposedly with a nuclear tip, that Nazi Germany could fire off with a human pilot, detach the second stage, which would just be a fitted V4, and fly a nuclear-tipped bomb at New York City. It was supposed to be the Big Apple destroyer. And also in Man in the High Castle, they do talk about that as potentially the source of them destroying Washington, D.C. But so there's a lot of history behind what Elon's talking about. He doesn't mention it, but it's very explicit that it's there. I don't know if making the terrestrial case, it kind of seemed like it was tacked on at the end of his presentation of like, oh, we could also do this. We can send people from New York to Shanghai in 39 minutes. I don't know if that's the best business case, because those tickets are going to be exorbitantly expensive.
Right.
And also, how are you going to get around the FAA and terrestrial aircraft monitoring systems being like, well, technically we're a rocket, but we're just doing a very high parabolic arc and going to another part of the world.
Much like the Hyperloop, we tend to not think about things like that.
We tend not to think about how realistic it could be. We just like to think about how scientifically cool it would be.
No, but I am happy to see them continuing to look forward, as slightly annoyed as I get by some of the questions. I'm happy to see that they're attempting to, for lack of a better term, push the envelope. So on his time scale, he says that he hopes to launch 2 unpiloted BFRs to Mars as early as 2022, followed 2 years later by 4 more flights, 2 unpiloted cargo missions, and 2 carrying astronauts. What do you think the real timetable of that is?
I
can see
the unmanned ones will be, assuming he keeps with this architecture, assuming that he goes with the idea of stockpiling Falcon 9s and Heavies and goes full BFR after that. 2035 is going to be the unmanned flights. They're going to probably attempt to land it near wherever humans are. At that point, if there are humans on the surface,
just launching rockets at them because he's angry he didn't get there first.
Well, no, I mean, like it would be that would be like a great way to test it. Is like
I know.
We'll land it near there and send some supplies with it too, and then the manned ones will not come for another 5 years. So 2040 might be the first manned commercial flight to Mars.
See, I think he can nail I think he can nail an unpiloted BFR by 2030. I think that is feasible. And then the next one won't. There's no way he's doing 2 of those in a year. The next one comes in like 2034, 2035, around the time that you were talking about. And then as far as a cargo mission, I could see a cargo mission in the 2039, 2040 time frame. maybe even early, maybe like 2038 or 2039. And then I would give the two carrying astronauts, that's 2045, 2046. There is a
All right,
ton.
so you've expanded the timeline in both directions.
Yes, I have.
Okay.
There's just so much. There's so much science and engineering that goes behind all of these things that he's talking about. Even going to the 100 people per flight to Mars thing that he's talking about. Do you have any idea how much NASA is studying as far as psychology for a flight to Mars among 12 people to not murder each other?
Mars is like, for NASA, Mars is like 4 people going or like 6 people going max.
Right.
For Elon's like, oh, we'll figure it out with 100 people.
With 100 people, not if you send 100 people, you're lucky if all but 2 don't end up dead.
Yeah.
Them just killing each other.
Well, remember, and this is something that our illustrious leader, Bill Nye the Science Guy, said, very few people really want to go to Mars. There's nothing to breathe there. There's nothing to eat there. There's nothing to drink there. It's not this paradise. It's not the new world.
Right.
And to compare it to such does not give justice to the amount of work that's going to go into sending human beings, fleshy-bodied human beings, to a red, dusty rock in the sky.
Right. Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. Yeah, I definitely think that it is something that I understand wanting to get off the planet. Trust me, I do. Especially after this week.
Especially after this week,
I do. However, you're better off here. This place is literally suited for you as a human being. For the most part.
You are almost evolutionarily designed to live here. It's almost like you were bred for this.
Oh yeah, it's crazy. All right, moving on, because we've only got let's say like 12-15 minutes left. So the UAE announces their astronaut corps. The UAE has approved a manned spaceflight program and could begin training of the first Emirati astronauts as Emirati or Emirati? Emirati. There we go.
Yeah.
That's how you say it. Yes.
I'm just going to say yes.
Sure. Yell at Jack on Facebook. Facebook.com/Astra podcast.
Twitter.com/Jack_Corelli.
There you go. But anyway, the UAE is looking at beginning their first manned space flight program as early as next year, according to senior government officials. So, Salam Humaid Al-Mari, Assistant Director General at the Mohammed bin Rashid Space Center, said that putting a UAE astronaut in orbit was part of a sustainable human spaceflight program with a serious purpose, rather than simply for prestige, which I don't know what that means. But yeah, this is an initiative from the UAE to actually have a sustainable long-term human spaceflight program. And we've talked in past episodes about them wanting to play a big role in the Mars mission. So maybe this is them figuring out how they could stake, 1 or 2 astronauts on that mission. I mean, it's going to be a very international mission.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think this is where we're going to start seeing the next space race, or at least the next human space race, is in these new space agencies. I mean, of course, Australia made their announcement, and it's not like Australia made the announcement, so all these countries are like scrambling together to put together their announcement.
Oh man, we better get a space agency.
This has been in the works, at least for the UAE, I know, for a while. I mean, if you think back to episode 11 of the show, we talked to Saeed El Gergawi, who is a friend of the show. Yeah. I know, right? It's not like I looked that up or anything. But yes, me and Saeed had a conversation at the Humans to Mars Summit, and what he was highlighting some of the things that they're working on, and part of that was in developing what their astronaut corps will look like. Who are they going to pick? Who are they going to train? How are they going to train them? Building the facilities to train astronauts is not a cheap thing. You can't just build a giant Olympic-sized swimming pool and put a couple astronauts in there and let them float around. I mean,
and
neutral
then before
buoyancy
you know it, you have
tanks.
100 on their way to Mars. No.
Yeah, I mean, neutral buoyancy tanks are just like part of the problem. I mean, you need centrifuges, you need locker rooms, gyms. I mean, like just the very simple, basic human needs have to be met at these astronaut training camps. Actually, I think one of my friends went to the UAE recently to talk to them about their space program, and his specialty is in designing astronaut training facilities. And so I'm sure that is part of the discussion that they had, but this is something that they're looking to the international community for help with, because they want to be involved in whatever missions come up. They might not have a seat on a manned mission to Mars, but you can be sure that they're going to have some of the backup folks or some of the ground support. I mean, because this is going to be a global effort. And I also think that they're a little bit more realistic with their Mars 2117 plan than
that's way more realistic
than the Elon Mars 2024 plan. But,
although it's like I said, I think though, I don't think they'll be a part of our first mission necessarily. Maybe not. But I definitely think that they will play a role and have an astronaut or two join us on subsequent missions. Going forward, human spaceflight in general, as we talked about last week with Roscosmos and the Deep Space Gateway, it's got to be an international effort. This is not something that the United States can do alone, especially when they're only investing less than half a penny on the dollar, right? This is something that we have to get together, bring as many nations as possible along this journey. So what's interesting about this is it's starting to look like the late 2020s and the early 2030s, well, the late 2020s and on, are going to be sort of this revival almost of human spaceflight.
Yeah. And I think that
not that we're not doing human spaceflight now, but it looks like we're really going to start kicking it into high gear in the late 2020s, early 2030s. That's going to be a really interesting time because we're preparing for all of these up and coming missions.
Well, so two things. One, in the article that we have linked down in the show notes, it talks about how the UAE Space Agency is looking to create a Mars Science City in the UAE. And the UAE is in a very similar climate to simulate the exploration of the Martian surface. So we could very
really
well
hot
see
instead of really cold, but yes, that's true.
Yeah. I mean, it mainly focuses on the daytime operations, but
yep.
I would not be surprised if in the next 5 to 10 years we don't have American astronauts in the UAE training to become the first astronauts to walk on Mars. And the second thing I wanted to bring up is, I think you're right that the late 2020s are going to start becoming a
revival, a renaissance.
If not the target, it's going to actually become, you're right, the renaissance for human spaceflight, and not just to the ISS. So one of the news stories, I kind of just added this in. I didn't even put this in the show notes, Newton. So sorry if I'm springing this on you. But Russia announced at the UAE that they and the US will cooperate on building the Deep Space Gateway. So I mean that's something that we've talked about.
Previously. I guess that's not so surprising because we've been talking about it.
We did. But I just wanted to sort of bring that back into the fold here. As we get closer and closer to the 2020s, a lot of these deals are going to start getting hashed out, and we're going to learn more about what this picture is going to look like in the late 2020s or early 2030s, where you might have humans walking on the surface of the moon thanks to commercial or international partners, and astronauts gearing up to be the first to walk on Mars thanks to NASA and its commercial contractors. So we're starting to see, I guess, with all of the bad news that surrounds us on a daily basis, especially here in DC, it's good to see that there's the cobbling together of what will be a massively international, interagency, interplanetary voyage to the red planet.
Can't wait. Can't wait.
Yeah.
All right, let's get through a few more news items here. So a little bit more of international news. Egypt gets a space agency too. All right.
Oh my God! Is
doing
everybody getting a space agency now?
You get a space agency, and you get a space agency.
Egypt announced it from Cairo. Actually, they although they had people in Adelaide for the IAC, this news is coming via the Associated Press from Cairo that Egypt now has draft legislation put together that will establish a space agency in the coming years. They have not specified what the timetable is going to be and what they expect their capabilities to be. But
I also haven't seen the draft legislation either.
I mean, Egypt being closer to the equator than many spacefaring nations is going to open up the possibility of better launch opportunities and could very well be the first spacefaring nation in Africa. So, I mean, this is going to be a great advancement of Egypt's capabilities. Although there is some talk about China having played a role in this, opening up a launch port for them. There's a lot of politics around this, but
China's got some dealings in Africa that we could go on a whole episode about.
Well, and so this is kind of why I'm saying that like the big human space race is going to be taking place with these new countries. It's going to be the U.S., Russia, and China sort of hashing out which countries are, quote, on their side, meaning who is that country going to give preferential treatment to when giving away assets or astronauts, and then also like, what country is going to help in the development of the technology for that, I guess, benefactor country, like the US, Russia, or China, what they're going to get out of the deal. And if that's spaceports in Africa, or if that's astronauts out of the UAE, the breadth of this issue is nearly endless. So we will keep you all up to date when the next new space agency gets announced.
So, all right. So, a couple more pieces of news latest in tech, and they both actually have to do with satellite imagery and mapping. So, this hits on a topic that we've been talking about, here and there over the last few weeks, which is hurricanes impacting islands to the south of us, as well as small cities to the south of us. So, NASA kind of has a spotlight on Puerto Rico. They've been producing a series of maps using some of their imaging capabilities, specifically the specifically using a capability for interferometric. Oh, if I could talk today, synthetic aperture radar, or INSAR satellite imagery of some of the areas just of eastern Puerto Rico to identify areas that are likely damaged. INSAR is a specific radar technique used in remote sensing. The method uses two or more synthetic aperture radars, or SARs, images to generate to generate maps of surface deformation or digital elevation. So NASA's team over at JPL and Caltech out in Pasadena use this imagery in order to identify areas that were specifically damaged due to the impacts of the hurricane. They acquired some imagery from much before the storm on March 25th, 2017, and compared it to imagery that they took after the storm. If you recall, the storm, Hurricane Maria, took place on September 20th. They did it after landfall on September 21st, and were able to produce a beautiful, well, not so beautiful, but a very informational damage map that can actually be downloaded from JPL's website. This was done using the Copernicus Sentinel-1 satellites that are actually operated by the European Space Agency. If you go back, I don't have Jack's recall, but we talked about those in like episode 8 or 7.
I think that was episode 8, about the hour and 3 minute marker, I think.
I swear to God. So
please, I want someone to fact check on this.
I know, right?
Check us.
Go back and listen to some of the old episodes, and then
listen to all of them. Right? It's like West Wing. You have to listen to the whole thing, right? Or watch the whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this is an episode. This is a binge podcast.
You will not be lost, I swear.
But yeah, you can see on the maps. I'm taking a look at one here. You see different color variations on the maps from yellow to red that indicate it's sort of an increasingly more significant ground and building surface change. So it gives you information about the structure, and in doing this, you can actually identify potentially damaged areas. And areas that may be less reliable over vegetated and flooded areas. So NASA delivered the map to a series of agencies that will also be using these maps for their rescue and recovery efforts, because that's the only way to get a sense of what is damaged and what isn't. Keep in mind, there's no cell phone tower infrastructure anymore in Puerto Rico. 90% of those people are without power. So 90% of the 3.4 million people there, about 3.06 million people are out of power. And this is the only way to actually get a sense of situational awareness. I recall working on something similar, actually, that we were marketing to DHS back in the day that I won't talk about on this podcast. Without satellite imagery. So yeah, the radar was processed by the Advanced Rapid Image and Analysis team at JPL, so shout outs to them. Just one more example of NASA taking imagery using its satellites and using it to help the folks of Puerto Rico. There was another image produced on September 27th, a composite image with photos that were taken by NASA and NOAA's SUMI NPP satellite, which is a weather probe that monitors the long-term effects of climate change, natural disasters, air pollution, and more. This is one of those, when people ask you why we have Earth sciences satellites, it's because we might want to keep an eye on Earth.
It's NASA, only like where we live, right?
Yeah, who cares, right? NASA officials put together artificial light maps of Puerto Rico. One shows a typical night before Maria, and another composite image from, like I said, September 27th and actually into September 28th shows widespread outages on the island after the storm. Now, like we said, most of the places on the island are out. It's good to know what, specifically, even from a power grid and black start recovery standpoint, it's good to know what went out first. And what were the sequence of events, the cascading event that took out most of the island, both in terms of general physical damage as well as damage to the infrastructure itself, because that can actually guide you when it comes to recovery and what needs to get recovered first. Oh, this transformer popped, this generator popped. Knowing that can at least help this black start effort that's going to take like months, if not years, to get back online. It'll take months to get the main areas back online. Maybe if we help them sufficiently, it could go about a month. If not, it'll take longer. But to get most of Puerto Rico back online, I mean, that, I hate to say it, but it'll take, it could take up to over a year to do that. So, NASA hopes these kinds of images will be vital aids to the first responders of Puerto Rico, and they're still focusing on getting hospitals and the country's airports back on the grid, according to recent updates from the Department of Energy. As I said, even one report said that I believe there was only 16 hospitals left with power on the island. 80% of their transmission lines went out, and this island has just been incredibly devastated. This is, for anyone who works in critical infrastructure, this is the nightmare scenario. So, like we said at the beginning of the show, whatever you guys can do to help them, as far as giving time, giving money, funding things being shipped there. I heard the Jones Act was recently passed. Thank goodness. Well, it was actually only for 10 days, but they're going to need as many supplies and just help as possible. It is a bad situation in Puerto Rico right now, and I don't know if that is being stressed enough. So
yeah, it is. It is really bad down there. So I guess our last two bits of news that I wanted to bring up, sort of in latest in tech. And I guess this is sort of our coming soon to space segment as well, since there's, other than the National Space Council meeting, there's not much else coming up. I mean, other than the usual, sometimes there's committee hearings, sometimes there isn't, stuff that's going on. So one of the first things is NASA is going to announce the new schedule for Exploration Mission 1. This is the first launch. It's going to be an uncrewed launch, as confirmed a couple months ago. I think that was episode 13, 14 maybe, if I'm mistaken, where we talked about the Space Launch System, SLS, is going to be making its first combined launch with the Orion crew capsule, sending the capsule around the moon and bringing it back. People were eyeing it for as early as 2017, back when we were full of youth and optimistic about things. But now it's starting to look more like late 2019. The report is expected to announce that the launch date will be no earlier than December 15th, 2019. I think that's the day the other one of the Star Wars movies comes out. And that EM2, which would be the first crewed SLS launch, would launch no earlier than June 2022. So Elon's going to get there first, I guess, is our takeaway from there. But yeah, so
Sure.
be on the lookout for that report. The GAO released a report a while ago, sort of citing some problems with the SLS, which sort of led us down this rabbit hole of topics around SLS, whether they're going to crew the first mission or not. But it seems like they're going to set it in stone. December 15th, 2019 is the earliest date they're going to launch EM1, no crew, and then June 2022 with a crew. And the next little bit of news, not really coming soon to space, is more, I guess, techie stuff, is that Lockheed Martin, who they also have a Mars exploration architecture called Mars Base Camp, which they announced at the Humans to Mars Summit 2016. So that was a major event that I was, fortunate to be there for. Newton, you were there as well, though I think you were talking to Andy Weir or something in the back room.
Yeah, we were chatting it up.
Just chatting it up. But yeah, so the Lockheed Martin plan got amended to include a reusable lander that very much looks like if you took the front half of the space shuttle and lopped it off and stuck it to the bottom half of rocket ship Luna from Destination Moon. That's kind of what it looks like. And also it's like olive green, so it's like the most Lockheed Martin thing ever designed. But yeah, so that's just a change in the architecture, just sort of playing around with new ideas and seeing what sticks. And this whole idea of a reusable lander is both very timely with IAC going on and people talking about what it's going to take to get to Mars, as well as NASA figuring out their plan to get to Mars. And anyone that can come up with a working reusable lander for the Martian surface will probably get a very nice government contract out of it. So that's sort of where Lockheed Martin is coming from with this plan. But it'll be exciting to see how Mars Base Camp, BFR, whatever Blue Origin's eventual plan is, whatever Boeing's eventual plan is, how they all kind of come together and form the basis for what will be the deep space transport under
Voltron.
NASA.
Yeah, no, it's going to take all of them. Like, there's not going to be one big contractor that's going to do all this. It's going to, just like it's going to take a number of nations to do this. I mean, it's going to take, Boeing's going to play a role, Northrop's going to play a role, Lockheed's going to play a role, SpaceX is going to play a role. I was going to say Orbital. I almost said Orbital there.
I know. I saw your eyes. I saw your eyes in the video. You were going to say Orbital, but then you didn't because you realized it's now Northrop Grumman.
Yes. Now a fourth division of Northrop. We talked about that like 2 episodes ago. But yeah, no, everyone's got to play a role.
Episode 28, by the way. I keep count.
What's that?
Episode 28. I keep count.
Gotcha. But yeah, everyone needs to play a role. It's kind of I guess that's the theme of tonight's episode. Everybody's got a role to play.
Everyone's got a role.
Donate to Puerto Rico. Donate to all of the all of the charities that for all of the last week's insane events. Yeah.
Oh, and you know what else everyone needs to do? Hey, you listening right now, you're nodding off. I can tell. You need to design our T-shirt. Come on. You have
got
until
a role
Sunday.
to play in Ad
you have
Astra.
a role to play. I hope that woke up our listeners.
Yeah.
But yeah, please design a T-shirt by Sunday, 11:59 and 57 seconds. We will not budge on this anymore. If it's 58 seconds, you're out. No way you're going to get the T-shirt. But all right, I guess that's everything that I got for this week. We're just over an hour, so right on schedule.
All right. Well,
as always, I'm Jack.
And I'm Newton.
Ad Astra.